In this video, we will take you through the complete and updated list of individuals scheduled for execution in March 2025 across various death row facilities in the United States. Initially, only 3 executions had been confirmed, but just recently, 3 more names have been added, increasing the total to 6 individuals. Each of their stories is as haunting, it is complex, reflecting the gravity and controversy surrounding capital punishment in America today. Let's begin with the case of Brad Keith Sigmon, who was on death row in the state of South Carolina. Brad had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Rebecca Barber. They lived together for 3 years before their relationship came to an end in early 2001. Rebecca moved back in with her parents in an effort to start fresh, but Brad could not accept the breakup. He became dangerously obsessed and began stalking her, desperately trying to force a reconciliation. On the night prior to the tragic events, Sigmon spoke with his friend Eugene Struy, revealing a deeply disturbing plan. He intended to break into the Lark family home, tie up Rebecca's parents, and pressure her into having a conversation with him. Struy refused to be involved, warning Sigmon against it, but the latter moved ahead alone. The next morning, Sigmon forced his way into the Lark residence, where he found David and Gladys Lark, Rebecca's parents, inside. What followed was a gruesome and brutal attack. Armed with a baseball bat, Sigmon bludgeoned both individuals repeatedly in the head, killing them. After committing the double murder, he took David's firearm and stayed in the house, waiting for Rebecca to return. When she arrived, he confronted her at gunpoint and forced her into his car. He planned to take her across state lines to North Carolina, but in a moment of immense courage and survival, Rebecca managed to escape. She jumped from the moving car even as Sigmon opened fire. Miraculously, she survived, though she required immediate hospitalization due to the trauma. A statewide manhunt was launched almost immediately, leading to a swift arrest. Sigmon was charged with multiple serious crimes, including 2 counts of murder, kidnapping, and assault with intent to kill. His trial commenced on July 18, 2002, in South Carolina. From day one, the prosecution presented overwhelming and conclusive evidence, including the baseball bat used to commit the murders. During the trial, Sigmon behaved oddly, even displaying photos of Rebecca in the courtroom without any context, leaving the jury and attendees puzzled. Despite his strange behavior, the jury reached a decision quickly. That same day, he was sentenced to death. His mother, Virginia Wooten, broke down emotionally as the verdict was read aloud, while Rebecca sat in silence, processing the moment. Sigmon looked at her once more before being taken away in handcuffs. Over the course of more than 2 decades, Sigmon has remained on death row, filing appeal after appeal, all of which have been denied. His execution has now been officially scheduled for March 7, 2025. Unusually, Sigmon opted to be executed by firing squad rather than the standard method of lethal injection. According to his defense team, this choice was influenced by concerns regarding recent lethal injection executions involving the drug pentobarbital, where witnesses claimed inmates lost consciousness quickly. But official pronouncements of death took upwards of 20 minutes. In response to these controversies, the state of South Carolina has spent approximately $54,000 in 2022 to build a dedicated firing squad chamber within its execution facility. Next, we move to the case of David Leonard Wood, a convicted serial offender. From Texas, his criminal record stretches back to the mid-1970s. In 1976, Wood was first arrested and convicted for committing indecency with a minor, for which he received a 5-year prison sentence. He served only 2 years and was released in 1978. Just 2 years later, in 1980, he committed to horrifying rapes, one of a 19-year-old woman and another of a 13-year-old girl, both in El Paso, Texas, although he was sentenced to 20 years. In prison for these crimes, he ended up serving only 6 years before being paroled in 1987. After his release, Wood started working at a furniture store in El Paso. That same year, a terrifying wave of disappearances began. 9 women, ranging in age from 13 to 24, went missing without explanation. On October 23, 1987, Wood was arrested once again this time for the kidnapping and rape of a woman named Kelling. His arrest led law enforcement to uncover a series of buried bodies and pieces of circumstantial evidence, including clothing fibers that matched those of the victims. Additionally, fellow inmates testified that Wood had boasted about the murders. While in custody, although not all the missing women were definitively linked to Wood, he was charged with the murders of several of them due to widespread media coverage in El Paso. The trial was moved to Dallas. Despite mounting evidence, Wood maintained his innocence throughout. Nevertheless, in 1992, he was convicted of 6 murders. On January 14, 1993, he was sentenced to death. Now aged 67, David Leonard Wood is scheduled to die by lethal injection on March 13, 2025. After decades of incarceration and repeated failed attempts to overturn his conviction, the third case is that of Christopher Cito, who was sentenced to death in the state of Louisiana for one of the most heinous crimes ever committed against a child. In March 1992, Cito took the life of his 6-year-old stepson, Wesley Allen Mercer, under circumstances that left even seasoned investigators shaken. The young child had a bathroom accident at school. Upon returning home, both Cito and his wife denied him food and clean clothes for 2 full days. When the child hesitated to get into the bathtub, Cito lost control. He viciously beat Wesley with the handle of a screwdriver until he lost consciousness. Then he submerged the unconscious child in boiling hot water. By the time the child was rushed to the hospital, it was too late. He had already succumbed to the extensive burns inflicted upon his body. In 1993, Cito was arrested and sentenced to death for the crime. However, Louisiana's fluctuating position on the death penalty delayed his execution multiple times over the following decades. It wasn't until recently that a new date was set, March 17, 2025, but fate took a different course. Just weeks before his scheduled execution, Cito passed away from natural causes inside the Louisiana State Penitentiary Infirmary at Angola. He was 81 years old at the time of his death, wheelchair-bound, and suffering from numerous health issues, including chronic obstructive pulmonary disease (COPD), a blocked artery in his brain, and gangrene, which ultimately led to sepsis. According to his attorney, Sean Nolan, these medical complications contributed to his death before the state could carry out the execution. Each of these cases reveals the complexities of justice, punishment, and the ultimate price society demands from those who commit such unthinkable crimes. As their scheduled execution dates approach or pass, in the case of Cito, public attention once again turns toward the debate over capital punishment, its effectiveness, and its morality. In this extended report, we continue examining the chilling timeline of executions scheduled for March 2025 in the United States. While capital punishment remains a controversial and emotional topic, the legal processes behind these executions are often decades in the making, following long appeals, reviews, and public debate. What makes this upcoming month particularly significant is the rare number of executions planned, each involving deeply disturbing crimes that have left lasting scars on victims, families, and communities. Let's resume with the case of Christopher Cito, whose health and legal status sparked widespread controversy even before his death. Cito had been scheduled for execution in Louisiana after being convicted in 1993 of the horrific killing of his 6-year-old stepson, Wesley Allen Mercer. Yet, weeks before his execution date, he passed away naturally in prison. His legal team had called his potential execution barbaric, arguing that he was already a dying, fragile old man, suffering from multiple chronic health conditions including severe artery blockage, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease (COPD), and gangrene-induced sepsis. The Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections confirmed that Cito died due to these pre-existing medical complications. In their eyes, nature had delivered what the state had been legally unable to carry out for over 3 decades. We now turn to Jesse D. Hoffman Jr., another Louisiana death row inmate whose execution is scheduled for March 18, 2025. His crime, committed in November 1996, stunned New Orleans and led to calls for swift justice. At just 18 years old, Hoffman abducted Mary Elliott, a 28-year-old advertising executive working in downtown New Orleans. He forced her to withdraw money from an ATM and then drove her to a remote wooded location in St. Tammany Parish, where he sexually assaulted and ultimately murdered her. The brutality of the attack, paired with the fact that the victim was a respected member of the community, made the case one of the most high-profile in Louisiana at the time. He was arrested, tried, and ultimately convicted of first-degree murder. The jury, moved by the weight of evidence and the cruelty of the crime, sentenced him to death on September 11, 1998. After over 2 decades on death row, his execution is finally set via nitrogen hypoxia, an execution method that will be used in Louisiana for the very first time. This execution also marks the state's first in over 15 years, making it both legally and historically significant. Another execution set for the following day, March 19, 2025, involves Aaron Brian Gunes in the state of Arizona. Gunes's crimes span over several years and involve both calculated murder and reckless violence. On November 14, 2002, he visited the home of his girlfriend in Mesa, Arizona, where he encountered Ted Price. Under the guise of taking him to a bus station, Gunes convinced Price to get into his car. But what appeared to be a simple ride turned into something far darker. Instead of taking Price to his destination, Gunes drove him deep into the desert along the Beeline Highway, where he pulled out a gun and shot him 4 times, killing him. In the remote wasteland, Gunes evaded capture for a short while until, in January 2003, he was stopped at a traffic checkpoint by an Arizona public safety officer. Instead of cooperating, he opened fire on the officer and fled, triggering a massive manhunt involving over 50 officers. He was eventually caught the following day, hiding inside a barn in Windon, Arizona. His trial was long and contentious, but in 2004, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to death in 2008. Interestingly, unlike many inmates who seek to delay their execution, Gunes has made multiple public statements criticizing Arizona's justice system for not carrying out his sentence. His previously scheduled execution in April 2023 was postponed due to legal challenges, but the Arizona Supreme Court has now finalized a new date, March 19, 2025, via lethal injection. The next case comes from Florida, involving Edward James, whose crimes date back to September 20, 1993. That night, James returned home from a party and entered the residence of Elizabeth and Betty Dick, where her grandchildren were asleep. Among them was 9-year-old Tony Nooner, who James approached and brutally attacked. After rendering her unconscious, he took her to a secluded part of the home where he sexually assaulted her. Tragically, Tony succumbed to her injuries soon after, but James's rampage didn't stop there. He entered the bedroom of Betty Dick and assaulted her with a heavy object and a knife, causing severe wounds. The noise from this attack drew the attention of Wendy, Betty's other 9-year-old granddaughter. As she entered the room, she too was attacked, though James ultimately fled the home. He took several of the family's possessions and escaped by car. The case quickly drew national attention and was featured on America's Most Wanted, leading to an outpouring of public tips. He was finally arrested on October 6, 1993, at an unemployment office in Bakersfield, California. In 1995, Edward James pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and kidnapping, among other charges. On August 18th of the same year, he was sentenced to death. He has spent the past 30 years on death row at Florida State Prison. Now, his long-delayed execution is scheduled for March 20th, 2025. The final case on this March execution list comes from Oklahoma, involving Wendell Arden Grome, a man whose crimes shocked the small community of Blaine County in November 2005. After consuming large amounts of whiskey and discussing possible burglaries with his accomplice Johns, the two randomly selected a house to break into. They could not have predicted the bloodbath that would follow. Upon entering the home, they encountered Drew Cobb, who was inside with his two daughters and their guest, Amber Matthews. Cobb tried to reason with them, but Grome shot him in the head, killing him instantly. As Amber Matthews attempted to flee the house while carrying a baby, Grome shot her twice, once in the back of the head and once in the forehead. She died instantly. While trying to protect the children, Grome and Johns then stole a vehicle from the garage and fled, but were captured shortly afterward at a nearby convenience store. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming. Grome was charged and later convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and other violent felonies. While Johns received a life sentence without parole, Grome was sentenced to death. His clemency hearing is scheduled before his execution, but unless it results in a rare commutation, he will be executed on March 20th, 2025. Each of these stories represents a painful and prolonged journey through the American justice system. From the initial crimes to the trials, convictions, and the long wait on death row, the upcoming executions in March 2025 bring to light some of the most brutal and emotional cases in recent U.S. criminal history. Whether one supports or opposes the death penalty, these cases force us to grapple with difficult questions about justice, morality, and accountability in a system that must balance punishment with human rights. If you found this report informative, please consider subscribing for more deep-dive criminal case profiles. Be sure to like, comment, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story.